Howdy guys. All right, so welcome to part two of the video here. And for this, we're going to start working on the CSS styling. And for this, we're going to just kind of talk about a couple little concepts in CSS that I found really useful over the time that I've been learning how to do all this stuff. And pardon me if I start going a little bit crazy. I really like CSS. So yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. So one of the cool things is a lot of times when you see people doing styling in CSS, they'll do something like this, where they'll say, color, and they'll have, a color, right? Like red, um, whatever, inside of what they're doing. That works. It's fine. That's kind of how I started out doing everything too, and I still do it occasionally. But one thing I like to do is it's just kind of a way for me to keep track of things, and also after working on some larger scale projects, I figured that I had situations where I was trying to say, change a border on something, and I found that I had to go through, multiple lines of code to actually change, all the button borders or something like that. And the text inside of them to red from blue or vice versa, and they got really tiresome. And on a small scale project, it's not that big of a deal. Something like this, not that big of a deal. But for a larger scale project, there is an alternative for that. And what you can do is you can declare a root variable in CSS, where you would declare a root, and that's going to be a colon root, and then you would just do the curly bracket like normal. And then inside of here, you can actually set a variable. So, and you can do it for anything. You can do it for colors. You can do it for pixels. You can do it for EMs, REMs. You can do it for like a border if you wanted to, or a drop shadow. So you can do kind of whatever you want up in here with these variables. But for this project, we're going to go ahead and just use it for the colors here. And I'll probably do another video that goes a little bit more into detail on setting up CSS variables at some point in the future here. But for this one, we're just going to set up a couple colors that we're going to use in this site. And to do that, we're going to go start off here. So you would do 2 dashes, and then you would say whatever the variable name is. So in this case, background. And then I would set that to kind of an off-white color here. And I'm just going to use hexadecimal here. That's fine, but you could use RGB or the color name if you knew it. So we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna go ahead and just set a few more colors here as well, following that same format. So we're gonna do a red, and that we're gonna have as, and I do have these written down, so I'm just gonna copy these here. 3, and we'll do black. And I'm not gonna do a pure black. I'm actually gonna do one that's a really, really, really dark red that's almost black. And that's just something that I like to do to kind of keep that color consistency. It's subtle, you don't really notice it, but it does make a difference, especially on a really high quality screen. So, and then we'll do that. And then for white, we'll go ahead and, well, I should just use a hexadecimal for that. So we'll just do FFF. All right, cool. So now we've set up our color variables. So I'll show you how to call those in just a second here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start off with that div styling here. So, or actually, you know what? No, we'll go ahead and do the button styling. So I'm going to start off with just the general styling before we actually get into the div and the animation. So for the general button styling, we're just going to do button, call the button, and then we're going to give it a background, and we're going to make that background transparent here. Although you could make it whatever color you wanted. So I just went with transparent for this project. I am using a fixed width here, and that's just to help me out with the transition later. But again, you could use other units of measurement here. You could do percentages if you wanted to as well. So, but this because I was using a fixed pixel width. And then for the height, I did just use auto. So it's just gonna match the height to whatever it needs to fill the content or fit the content. I mean. And again, this is just, you can put whatever you want in here. I'm just kind of doing this because it's just something I wanted to make it look a little bit better than just a normal button. But you don't have to necessarily. You could just leave it as a normal button if you wanted to as well. So, and And actually, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and to save time, I'm just going to go ahead and copy CSS on over for the rest of it here. Now, one thing I am going to do though is instead of using these hexadecimals here, we're going to go ahead and call it as a variable. So I'm going to just delete that, and we're going to, instead of typing in the color red with the hexadecimal value, we're going to go var, and then we're going to just call that variable name red, and we'll do the same thing down here where the other color is. Cool. And then what that's going to do is when we go back into the live server here, oops, I forgot to do one thing. So back in your HTML, we got to make sure we actually connect it to the style CSS sheet. So we're going to go ahead and just do this. And save that. There we go. All right, so now we've actually connected that to the HTML here. So as you can see, we actually now have the color here. Now, cool thing we can do with this, and this is getting back to those variables and stuff, is so for example here, instead of now having to go in here and change the hexadecimal here and here, if we wanted to keep these both the same color, we could actually come up here and we could say change this to a different color. We'll do, we'll just call it blue here. And we save that now, and then we go back to this. As you can see, it's now blue. So this is a quicker way to have your color variables or your variables in one place, so that if you know you're going to be possibly changing it later on, so like if a client comes by and you've made everything red and they go, hey, can you make everything that's red blue or green or whatever, you can just come up here and just change that variable and to whatever the color is. And of course, you can name these variables whatever you want as well. So instead of calling this red, we could call this, button colors. If you wanted to, as long as when you call it, you're calling it as button colors instead of red. But for this, we're going to go ahead and leave it as red. So I'm just going to Control Z back to the red there. And we'll go ahead and say that again, make sure that everything's good. And so we're back to where we had it originally. Cool. So that is the button there. And then I'm also just going to add a little hover effect on the button here with the pseudo class hover. And again, I mean, this is completely optional. You don't have to do this part. But, just kind of to show a little bit of variety here. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy these variable names up here. And we're going to go ahead and drop that there. And then we're going to do this as well. Only we're going to change that from red to now white. And here we're going to change that from red to black. So now that's going to cause that little hover effect to happen on the button there. And I'm going to throw in some padding in there as well, I think. Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So now we have some padding in there. It's like I said, a little bit of basic styling. So again, totally optional. You can leave the button completely as it is without any styling if you wanted to, or you could use Bootstrap or something else, as long as it's something that you're liking there. Okay, cool. So that is the just basic CSS here. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and just do this as well. I'm just going to do a select all here. And so this is just going to basically be a low priority selector for everything. So like this will actually override it, but for the button, but this is going to make it so that just anything else that I put in here is going to be whatever the color is that I'm asking it to be. So or to have it apply to those elements. So in this case, I'm just going to do a not text align. I'm going to do let's see. I'm going to do background, and we're going to set that to background. And color, we're going to set that to and then we're going to do we're going to do a text align center there. And so that should just put everything in the center. Cool, perfect. All right, nice. And again, you can play around the styling as you want to. This is just kind of to get some things started here. And also, I just wanted to kind of show the CSS variables and how they kind of work and everything, how you can call them down here. So that is pretty much that. So now we're going to get to the actual animated part here. And this is where the actual animation gets started. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to just copy and paste some pre-made styling here that I did earlier for the div. So this is going to be just the starting point for the div here. And again, we can change these into the variables instead of the just hexadecimals here. Awesome. We'll save that. Now the next part is something that you're going to have to do for the animation here to have it work on the button, at least the way I found it. Now, there's probably other ways to do this, so don't think this is the only way to do it. This is just the way that I found that worked for what I was trying to accomplish. But in this case, what I did is we're going to basically just copy this, and we're going to bring this down here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the class name to animated div instead of non-animated div. And in here, we're going to actually add a new CSS property. So we're going to say, could put a comment here. Down here. So what we're doing here is we're basically creating a new class that, a new CSS class that's going to reference the HTML class. And what that's going to do is it's the exact same styling as the one we had before, the non-animated div. Only this one is going to add this animation property to it. And for that, we're going to say animation, and then we're going to call it, you can call it whatever you want. Basically, you want to make sure it's a unique name that you can remember. It's something that's probably, somewhat relevant to what you're trying to do. So in this case, I'm just going to say, I'll just say div. Yeah, we'll just call it, we'll call it animated. Yeah, we'll call it animated for the sake of this. But again, you can call it something else you want to. You can call it rocket ship, cat, dog, dragon, whatever. But the main thing is, you just want to name it something where you're going to call that name later. And we'll show that in just a second here. So the next thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to do the duration. So this, we're going to put it at 3 seconds. We're also going to do the animation timing, which in this case, we're going to do an ease in and an ease out. Now, there's other options for this as well. You could do a linear, you could do an ease in only, you could do an ease in and ease out, or you could do just an ease out. If you really want to check into those in a little more detail, W3 Schools and Mozilla Developer also has some really good kind of information on these here and everything. But basically, the ease in, ease out is just going to start off slow. It's going to speed up, and then it's going to slow down again. And again, that's just kind of an aesthetic choice that I did for this. But there are certain situations, like if you were, say, bouncing a ball or something like that, where you would want to probably use the ease in, ease out. I just did it here because I felt that it looked good. So. And the next one, this would be the animation delay. So in this case, we don't want to delay, so I'm just going to put 0 seconds. I only want it to play one time. And now after this is basically going to make it so that it stays on the last keyframe once it's all said and done. Although, actually, for this project, I don't think I want to do that. So we're going to leave that blank, actually. And what that should do is it should, when the animation plays, it'll play all the way through, and then it'll reset back to its initial state, or its first keyframe, basically. So that's the animation we're calling there. Put a space there. This one's a little bit more visible. And now just below that, we're going to do this. We're going to do at keyframes. And then we're going to actually, in that at keyframes, we're going to call the animation that we just named earlier. and then it's going to be just a normal CSS variable at this point, like normal. But what this is going to do is whatever variables you put inside of this, they'll be applied using this, which you'll see in action here in just a second. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to say change the background color, because I want it to basically stretch across the screen and then fade out as it's doing that. So to do that, what we're going to do is we have the initial states up here, and we're going to put a 2. Delete that request. You're going to do a 2, which is just saying, I'm leaving out the from in this case because we're starting off at where it is here. So I don't need to put the from necessarily for this, but you could also do a from if you wanted to, which is going to be the same thing as saying like 0% to 100%. But this case we're going to say 2, so it's going to be going to this. And we're going to do background color. Oops. Parent. We're going to get rid of the border. Get rid of the text. And we're going to make the width 100% because we want the stretch to fill the entire viewport here. Or 100% of its container, which would be the body in this case. And then height. We're going to keep the height 200 pixels, which actually we don't need to do because we're not changing the height, so we can leave that at 200 pixels that we have up here. Cool. So now we're going to go ahead and save this. And if I did everything correct here, when I go to the live server here on my local host, it shouldn't be doing anything yet, but you should just see the styling applied here. Now, if I go in here though, and I change this from non-animated div to animated div, and then save that, as you can already see, it's actually already moving, but it will now automatically stretch out and then fade away. So what we want to do is we want to have it basically, instead of doing that automatically, we want it to only do the animation when we click this button here. So to do that, we're going to start implementing in some JavaScript. And then inside the JavaScript, we're also going to set another function that is going to effectively be an event listener that's going to listen to that div with the ID of animated. And it's going to say, okay, when this thing plays an animation, once the animation ends, I'm going to go ahead and run this other function. And that function we're going to actually then call the new page load. So we'll do that in the next video here, and I hope to see you there. All right, thank you.